A racist security guard refused to let Michael Jordan board his jet. However, what happened next was a complete surprise and shocked everyone around him as they discovered how this incident changed everything. Michael Jordan stood on the balcony of his penthouse, gazing at the vast city below. The golden hues of the setting sun reflected off the skyscrapers, casting long shadows over the bustling streets. It was a view he had come to associate with success, a perspective that symbolized how far he had come from his modest childhood beginnings. But that evening, the view did little to suppress the restless energy coursing through him. He was on the verge of making a major decision. For Michael, owning a private jet had always been a dream, but not for the reasons most would assume. To many, a private jet symbolized extravagance and status, but for him, it was about something deeper: freedom. The freedom to move without limitations, to reach people and places, to expand his growing business empire, and, most importantly, to further his philanthropic aspirations. He envisioned it as a tool, not a trophy. The idea had taken root during a recent trip to a remote community in the Midwest. He had been invited to speak at a school where students struggled with poverty and a lack of resources. The experience left a profound impact on him. The wide-eyed curiosity and determination of those children reminded him of his own childhood, growing up with big dreams but limited opportunities. It was on the flight back, seated in a commercial airplane, that a thought struck him. What if he had the means to visit more schools, more communities, and provide real, tangible support? He ran a hand over his chin, deep in thought. The decision wasn't just about logistics. It was about making a statement. It was about showing the world and himself that he had reached a place where he could dream even bigger. The buzz of his phone pulled him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was Derek, his longtime business advisor and friend. "Michael, you there?" Derek's voice carried its usual animated energy. "Yeah, I'm here, just thinking," Michael replied, his voice steady but contemplative. "About the jet, right?" "I knew it." Derek chuckled on the other end. "So what's the verdict? Are you going to buy it?" Michael hesitated for a moment, then exhaled. "I think so. But it's not just for me, Derek. You know that." "I know and I respect that. But you have to be sure. It's a big investment, and it'll come with its own challenges. People will talk. You know how they are." Michael leaned against the railing, letting the night breeze cool his thoughts. He knew what Derek meant. Despite his success, he was no stranger to scrutiny. Every move he made was analyzed, criticized, and often misunderstood. But this wasn't about public opinion. This was about his vision, his purpose. "I've thought about it," he finally said, "but I can't let fear dictate my decisions. This isn't just about flying in luxury. It's about creating opportunities, breaking barriers. If people want to talk, let them. I'll show them what this jet really represents." Derek paused, then responded with a note of approval. "That's what I wanted to hear. All right, let's make it happen. I'll start looking into some options for you to review." Over the next few weeks, Michael immersed himself in the process of selecting the right jet. He visited hangars, spoke with manufacturers, and weighed the pros and cons of different models. He finally chose one that balanced luxury with practicality. It was spacious enough to accommodate his team and guests, equipped with state-of-the-art technology, and had the range to reach the most remote areas of the country. The day he signed the papers, he felt a wave of pride and anticipation. His vision was coming to life. On the eve of the inaugural flight, he sat in his living room, staring at a framed photo of his younger self, a skinny teenager clutching an oversized basketball, his eyes filled with hope and determination. He smiled, feeling a deep gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. "You've come a long way," he murmured to himself, "but the work is just beginning." The morning of the inaugural flight, the sun bathed the private runway in a warm glow. Michael savored the moment as his car rolled through the gates. His jet, a masterpiece of engineering and design, gleamed on the tarmac like a symbol of achievement. As he stepped out of the car, he was greeted by the crew preparing the plane for departure. Suddenly, a gruff voice shattered the calm. "Hey you! Stop right there!" Michael turned, frowning. A security guard was approaching with a stern expression and rigid posture. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, but his attitude was anything but welcoming. "Can I help you?" Michael asked, keeping his tone polite. The guard's eyes narrowed as he looked Michael up and down. This is a restricted area. You're not supposed to be here. Michael tilted his head, surprised by the man's tone. I know. I'm here for my flight, he replied, gesturing toward the jet. That's my plane. The guard let out a short, incredulous laugh. That's funny. Now show me some ID. Michael's patience was already wearing thin, but he reached into his pocket, pulled out his driver's license, and a laminated card verifying his ownership of the jet. The security guard snatched them from his hand, his eyes darting between the documents and Michael Jordan. This can't be right, he muttered under his breath. He looked up, his expression twisting with suspicion. How exactly did you buy a plane like this? Michael's jaw tightened. He had encountered prejudice before, but it never stopped stinging. I worked for it, he said firmly. Now if you're done, I'd like to board my flight. The guard, however, didn't back down. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice dropping but still laced with hostility. Look, buddy, I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but I've seen this before. You don't belong here. The accusation hit like a slap. Michael squared his shoulders, his towering presence now eclipsing the guards, but he kept his voice calm. I don't know what you think you've seen, but this is no scam. I own this plane, and I have every right to be here. The guard's face hardened, and he crossed his arms. We'll see about that. I'm calling the police. Before Michael could respond, the guard turned away and pulled a radio from his belt. He stood still, his mind racing. He could feel the crew's eyes on him, their curiosity tinged with unease. The sense of triumph that had filled him earlier had vanished, replaced by a heavy wave of anger and disbelief. Within minutes, the sound of sirens shattered the morning tranquility. 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing, and 4 officers stepped out. They approached with measured steps, hands resting on their belts. The security guard rushed to meet them, gesturing animatedly in Michael's direction. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain composed. He watched as the officers listened to the security guard's account, their expressions shifting from neutrality to skepticism. Finally, one of them turned to him. Sir, we're going to need to see your identification and proof of ownership of the aircraft, the officer said, his tone firm but lacking the outright hostility of the security guard. Michael handed over his documents again, keeping his movements deliberate. The officer examined them carefully, but the crease in his forehead did not ease. These documents seem legitimate, he finally said, though his tone carried a note of doubt. Still, we'll need to verify everything. I hope you understand. Michael nodded, though his patience was wearing thin. I understand, but this is unnecessary. Everything you need is right there. The verification process dragged on. The officers called aviation authorities to cross-check the documents. Michael stood beside the jet, arms crossed, while the security guard hovered nearby, a satisfied smirk on his face. The crew had stepped away, but their furtive glances spoke volumes. As the minutes stretched into nearly an hour, memories of the past began to resurface. Moments when he had been underestimated, dismissed, or insulted simply because of the color of his skin. He had thought he had left those experiences behind, but here they were again, showing their ugly faces. Finally, one of the officers approached, holding the documents. Everything checks out. You're free to go, he said, his tone dry, as if reluctant to admit it. Michael took the papers and looked directly into the officer's eyes. That's it? No apology for wasting my time or for assuming I didn't belong here? The officer hesitated, but before he could answer, the security guard cut in. Look, we were just doing our job. You should be glad we were thorough. Michael's temper flared. Thorough? This wasn't a standard procedure. This was pure prejudice, and you know it. The security guard's smirk vanished, but he didn't respond. The officers exchanged uncomfortable glances before returning to their cars. As the vehicles drove away, Michael walked back to the jet. What had once felt like a triumphant milestone was now tainted. As he boarded, his thoughts were a whirlwind of anger, disappointment, and determination. He knew this was more than just an isolated incident. It was a reflection of a deeper issue, something that couldn't be ignored. The engines roared, and the jet began taxiing down the runway. Michael looked out the window, his mind already formulating how he would respond to this situation. This wouldn't end here. The jet took off, but the usual euphoria of flight eluded him. He watched the city below gradually fade into a mosaic of fields and roads. His thoughts were a storm of frustration and disbelief. What should have been his first triumphant flight in his new jet had been overshadowed by the events on the ground. He gripped the armrest tightly, replaying the confrontation with the security guard and the humiliation in front of the police. The memory of the security guard's smug smile was like a thorn in his mind. He could still hear the condescension in his voice, dripping with suspicion and disdain. "You don't belong here." Those words echoed in his head, each repetition fueling his anger. It wasn't just what had been said, but the weight of the implication. No matter how far he had come or how much he had achieved, there were still people who saw him as less than he truly was, who believed he didn't deserve to be there. Michael let out a frustrated sigh and leaned back in his seat. His assistant, Ava, who was accompanying him on the flight, looked at him from across the cabin. She hesitated before speaking, her voice soft but concerned. "Michael, are you okay?" He turned to her, forcing a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine," he replied, but the strain in his voice betrayed him. Ava tilted her head, studying him. "You don't seem fine. That was heavy back there." Michael's smile faded. He looked down at his hands, the tension in his shoulders refusing to ease. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. "It was." Ava set her tablet aside and leaned forward. "You don't have to carry this alone, you know? What happened back there wasn't right. Anyone could see that." Michael appreciated her words, but they did little to numb the sting of what he had experienced. It wasn't the first time. His voice came out low. "You'd think I'd be used to it by now." "But you shouldn't have to be," Ava responded firmly. "You worked hard for everything you have. You earned this plane just like you earned your success. No one has the right to question that." Her words resonated, but they also brought a wave of conflicting emotions. Michael had always prided himself on his resilience, on his ability to overcome challenges and prove his worth through action. But this time, it felt different. The humiliation ran deeper. As the plane reached cruising altitude, his mind drifted back to his childhood. He recalled a specific incident from his early school years, a memory he had buried but never forgotten. He was 8 years old, sitting in a classroom full of children. It was career day and everyone had been invited to share their dreams for the future. When his turn came, he stood up, his voice filled with excitement. "I'm going to be a basketball star." The room erupted in laughter. His classmates didn't believe him, and neither did the teacher, who smiled indulgently and said, "That's a nice dream, Michael, but maybe you should think about something more realistic." That moment had stayed with him. It wasn't just the laughter, but the underlying message, that he wasn't enough, that his dreams were too big for someone like him. The memory blended with the morning's events, creating a bitter cocktail of emotions. Ava's voice broke through his thoughts. "Michael, what are you going to do about it?" He looked at her, caught off guard. "Do about what?" he asked. "About the way they treated you. Are you just going to let it go?" Michael hesitated. His first instinct was to ignore it, to focus on the positive and move forward. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. It wasn't just about him, it was about everyone who had ever been judged unfairly, everyone who had been made to feel like they didn't belong. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I can't just let it go. Not this time." Ava nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe this is an opportunity to make a statement, to show people that this kind of behavior isn't acceptable." Your words planted a seed in Michael's mind. As the plane flew, he began to consider how he could turn this experience into something meaningful. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but it was starting to transform into something else. Determination. The flight ended without incident, but the morning's events lingered like a shadow. As he stepped off the jet, he was greeted by a group of local organizers eagerly awaiting his arrival. Their warm smiles and firm handshakes stood in stark contrast to the hostility he had faced earlier. For a moment, he felt a glimmer of hope. A middle-aged woman named Clara led him to a group of children who had gathered to meet him. Their eyes sparkled at the sight of him, their excitement palpable. Michael knelt to their level, listening intently as they shared their dreams and aspirations. Moments like these reminded him why he did what he did. But even as he interacted with the children, the memory of the guard's words lingered in the back of his mind. The injustice gnawed at him, refusing to be ignored. As he got into the car that would take him to his next destination, he grabbed his phone and opened the camera app. He hesitated for a moment, then pressed the record button. Looking directly into the camera, he began to speak, his voice firm but full of emotion. Today was supposed to be a day of celebration. The first flight on my new jet, a symbol of everything I've worked for. But instead, I was met with suspicion, hostility, and not because I did anything wrong, but because of who I am and how I look. He took a deep breath before continuing. This isn't just about me. It's about a system that still judges people by the color of their skin, no matter how far they've come. I'm sharing this because I know I'm not alone. There are so many people out there who face this kind of treatment every day, and it needs to stop. We need to have these conversations even when they're uncomfortable. We need to demand something better. He ended the video with a promise. This isn't over. I'll make sure something good comes from this. For me, for you, for all of us. As he pressed the upload button and watched the video begin to spread, he felt a renewed clarity. The humiliation and anger were still there, but they were no longer just emotions. They were fuel for action, a catalyst for change. Sitting in the backseat of the car, watching the upload progress bar inch toward completion, he felt a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. Sharing his story wasn't a decision he had taken lightly, but it felt necessary, urgent. Because now it wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been unfairly judged, who had felt the sting of prejudice diminishing their achievements. When the video finally went live, Michael shut his phone and leaned back, gazing out the window as the car sped toward his next destination. For now, there was nothing more he could do. The rest was in the world's hands. It didn't take long. By the time he arrived at the hotel, his phone was vibrating relentlessly. Notifications flooded his screen. Comments, shares, messages of support. Ava, who had been tracking the video's reach, met him in the lobby, her expression a mix of awe and urgency. "Michael," she said, holding her tablet, "you're going viral, and not just a little. This is exploding." He raised an eyebrow, taking the tablet from her hands. The video had been viewed over 500,000 times in just 2 hours, and the numbers were climbing fast. Social media was on fire with discussions. Hashtags like #JusticeForAll and #MichaelSpeaks were gaining traction. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people were sharing their own stories of discrimination and voicing their support for Michael's call for change. The comments were a mix of outrage and solidarity. "This is disgusting. How is this still happening in 2025? You are an inspiration. Thank you for speaking up. Every time I think we've made progress, something like this happens. We need to do better." Michael took a deep breath. This had grown beyond what he had expected. But maybe, just maybe, this was the opportunity he needed to make a difference. But not all the reactions were positive. There were always detractors, voices questioning his intentions, accusing him of exaggerating or, worse, fabricating the incident for attention. "Here we go again, playing the victim card. Maybe if you acted like you belonged, this wouldn't have happened. Typical celebrity drama. Must be nice to have problems like this." Michael felt a flicker of anger as he scrolled through the negativity but pushed it aside. He hadn't shared his story for the trolls. He did it for the people who understood, for those who needed to see that they weren't alone. The buzz continued to grow. Overnight, the media picked up the story, and Michael found himself fielding interview requests from major networks. Derek sat across from him in the hotel lounge, a whirlwind of efficiency as he managed his schedule. "CNN wants a live interview tomorrow morning," he said, scrolling through his phone. "The New York Times is asking for a written statement, and there's an email from Oprah's team. They're interested in having you on the show." Michael ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of it all settle on his shoulders. "This is bigger than I expected," he admitted. "That's because it's not just about you," Derek said gently. "This is striking a chord with people. You've opened a door that many have been waiting to walk through." Derek's words stayed with Michael that night. Lying in bed, his thoughts blurred between past and present. He remembered the moments of discrimination he had faced throughout his life, some blatant, others subtle, but all leaving marks. He thought of the people who didn't have his platform, who couldn't share their stories with millions, and he thought about the future, about what he could do to make a difference. The next morning, Michael stepped into the spotlight with a renewed sense of purpose. The CNN interview was his first public statement since the video went viral. He approached the moment with a mix of determination and apprehension. Sitting across from the host, with the studio lights casting a warm glow, he spoke openly about what had happened. "This isn't just about me," he said, his deep voice steady but laced with emotion. "It's about a system that allows this kind of behavior to persist. I'm speaking up because I have the platform to do so, but so many people face this every day and don't have a voice. I'm doing this for them." The interview was raw and powerful, fueling the debate even further. By the end of the day, the story had gone global, sparking discussions on racism, privilege, and systemic bias. Social media buzzed with activity, and Michael found himself inundated with messages from people sharing their own experiences with prejudice and discrimination. One message in particular caught his attention. It was from a young man named William, who worked as a baggage handler at a small regional airport. William wrote about how he had been repeatedly passed over for promotions, despite his hard work and dedication, all because his supervisors assumed he didn't fit the image of a manager. He thanked Michael for speaking up, saying it had given him hope. Michael read the message twice, feeling a tightness in his chest. William's story was just one of many, but it underscored the importance of what he was doing. This wasn't just about exposing injustice. It was about empowering people to believe in their own worth and to fight for their place in a world that often tried to push them down. As the days passed, the conversation continued to grow. Activists and organizations reached out, offering support and sharing ideas on how to turn the momentum into meaningful action. Michael began to see a path forward, a way to channel his anger and frustration into something positive. However, not everyone was ready to embrace change. The administration of the airstrip where the incident occurred issued a statement that was both an apology and an attempt to deflect responsibility. They expressed regret over the misunderstanding, but did not acknowledge any wrongdoing on the part of the guard. They claimed he was simply following protocol. Michael was not surprised, but the response only strengthened his resolve. He knew that real change would not come from statements or superficial apologies. It would come from action, from holding people accountable, and from creating systems that prioritize justice and respect. By the end of the week, Michael's story had become a rallying cry. Protests were organized, petitions were created, and discussions about systemic bias took center stage in the media and public forums. Meanwhile, Michael was beginning to map out his next steps. He wanted to do more than just talk. He wanted to create lasting change. Sitting in his office one evening, reviewing plans for a new initiative to support marginalized communities, Ava walked in with a smile. "You won't believe this," she said, holding up her phone. "The airstrip just announced that they are implementing mandatory bias training for all employees. And the guard? He was fired." Michael looked up, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a step in the right direction. Michael Jordan used his private jet not just as a tool for his business, but as a means to serve others. He could provide free flights for patients in need of critical medical care, for families who needed to reunite in times of crisis, and for students traveling in pursuit of educational opportunities. The program, appropriately named Wings of Hope, would also partner with schools and community organizations to offer scholarships and mentorships in fields like aviation and engineering. Michael flipped through the pages of the proposal, his eyes lighting up as he absorbed the details. "This is it," he said, his voice full of conviction. "This is what I've been looking for." In the following weeks, Michael and Laura worked tirelessly to bring the program to life. They reached out to hospitals, schools, and charities, building partnerships and laying the groundwork for their first mission. Every detail was carefully planned, from the logistics of the flights to the stories of the people they would help. The inaugural flight of Wings of Hope was scheduled to transport a young girl named Sophia and her mother from a small town in Kansas to a children's hospital in Boston. Sophia was only 8 years old and had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition. Her family's modest income and the distance to specialized care made her treatment an overwhelming challenge. When they received the call from Michael's team offering assistance, Sophia's mother broke down in tears of relief and gratitude. On the day of the flight, Michael arrived early at the airstrip, eager to meet Sophia and her mother. The jet was ready on the runway, its sleek exterior now adorned with the Wings of Hope logo, a symbol of possibility and promise. When the family arrived, Michael greeted them warmly, kneeling to shake Sophia's hand. "Hi, Sophia," he said, his voice deep and kind. "Are you ready for an adventure?" Sophia nodded shyly, clutching a teddy bear to her chest. Her mother, still overwhelmed by the gesture, struggled to find words to thank him. "You're giving us hope," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how we could ever repay you." Michael placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to," he said with a smile. "This is what matters." The flight itself was a transformative experience. Sophia's initial nerves gave way to wonder as she gazed out the window, watching the clouds pass by. Michael joined her for a moment, pointing out landmarks below and sharing stories about his own travels. For Sophia, the journey was not just a means to receive medical care. It was a glimpse into a world she had never imagined. When they landed in Boston, a team of hospital staff was waiting to welcome them. Sophia and her mother were escorted to their next destination, but not before Sophia turned to wave at Michael, her smile wide with gratitude. That first flight set the tone for what Wings of Hope would become. News of the program spread quickly, capturing media attention and inspiring others to get involved. Donations began pouring in, allowing Michael to expand the initiative and add more flights to the schedule. Each mission brought its own set of challenges and triumphs, but the impact was undeniable. One particularly memorable flight involved transporting supplies to a hurricane-stricken region in the Caribbean. The jet was loaded with medical kits, clean water, and food, and Michael personally accompanied the team to ensure the delivery went smoothly. The devastation they encountered was heartbreaking, but the gratitude of the people they helped made every effort worthwhile. Beyond the flights, Michael began hosting events on board the jet. One evening, he invited a group of high school students from underprivileged communities for a special dinner in the air. The cabin, usually reserved for business meetings and travel, was transformed into an impromptu classroom. As the plane cruised above the clouds, Michael and his team shared stories of perseverance and success, encouraging the students to dream big. During one of these events, a boy named William hesitantly approached Michael. "Mr. Jordan," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "do you think someone like me could be a pilot?" Michael crouched down to meet William's gaze. "I don't think you can," he said with a smile. William's face fell for a moment before Michael continued. "I know you can, but you have to believe first. If you're willing to work hard, the sky's the limit. Literally." The boy's face lit up, and Michael felt a surge of pride. It was moments like these that he realized were the true measure of success. As Wings of Hope gained momentum, it became more than just a program. It became a movement, inspiring others to contribute in their own ways, from pilots volunteering their time to companies donating resources. The ripple effect was profound, touching lives far beyond what Michael had initially imagined. By the end of the year, Wings of Hope had completed dozens of missions, each one a testament to the power of turning adversity into action. Michael stood on the airstrip one evening, watching as another jet took off on a mission. The hum of the engines and the glow of the runway lights filled him with a sense of fulfillment he hadn't felt in a long time. As the plane disappeared into the night sky, Laura joined him, her hands in her pockets. "You did a good job, Michael," she said, her voice soft but full of pride. "We did a good job," he corrected, a smile tugging at his lips. "And we're just getting started." But also the dreamers, the young people who needed inspiration, had always needed someone to believe in them. Years ago, it was Laura who had first suggested the idea of hosting dinners aboard the jet. "Imagine this," she had said, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "We can turn the jet into a space of inspiration, a classroom in the sky. Invite students and give them an unforgettable experience. Show them that their dreams are possible." Michael Jordan loved the idea immediately. It combined two things he deeply valued: creating opportunities and showing people that their dreams were within reach. He envisioned these dinners not just as a meal, but as a transformative experience, a chance to plant seeds of hope and ambition in young minds. The first dinner was planned for a group of high school students from an underserved community in Chicago. They were young people who had grown up in environments where opportunities were scarce and dreams often felt unattainable. Michael wanted to give them a night they would never forget. The night began at a small private terminal where the students, dressed in their finest attire, gathered with wide eyes and nervous smiles. Many of them had never been near an airplane, let alone boarded one. Michael personally greeted them, shaking hands and cracking jokes to put them at ease. His imposing presence could be intimidating, but his warm demeanor quickly broke down any barriers. As the group boarded the jet, their awe was palpable. The interior, usually reserved for business meetings and executives, had been transformed for the occasion. The seats were arranged around elegantly set tables with shimmering white tablecloths, gleaming glasses, and sophisticated arrangements that sparkled under the soft cabin lighting. The atmosphere was one of understated luxury, designed to make the students feel special. Once everyone was settled, the jet taxied down the runway and took off. The students gasped as the city lights transformed into a carpet of twinkling stars beneath them. For many, this was their first flight, and the experience was both exhilarating and surreal. As the plane reached cruising altitude, dinner service began. A team of chefs had prepared a gourmet menu, but the true highlight of the night wasn't the food, it was the conversation. Seated at each table were mentors from different fields, including pilots, engineers, entrepreneurs, and artists, all carefully selected for their ability to inspire and connect with the students. Michael Jordan himself moved from table to table, engaging in heartfelt conversations and sharing his story. He spoke about his journey from a young boy with big dreams to becoming a basketball legend and later an entrepreneur and philanthropist. He was honest about the challenges he faced, the skeptics, the obstacles, the moments of doubt, and how he overcame them. At one of the tables, he sat across from William, a shy but bright-eyed teenager who had been handpicked by his school counselor to attend the dinner. William had a passion for aviation but had never dared to say it out loud, fearing ridicule or discouragement. As the meal progressed, Michael noticed his reserved demeanor and decided to encourage him to speak. "William," Michael said, leaning forward with a kind smile, "what's your dream? What do you want to do when you grow up?" William hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the table. Finally, he took a deep breath and answered, "I want to be a pilot, but I don't think it's realistic." Michael's smile widened. "Why not?" William shrugged, his voice barely a whisper. "It's expensive, and I don't know anyone who has done it. People like me don't become pilots." Michael's expression turned serious. "William, I want you to listen to me carefully. Never let anyone tell you what you can or can't be. If you have passion and determination, you can achieve it. And you're not alone. There are programs, scholarships, and people who want to help you reach your dream." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card with the Wings of Hope logo. "This is my promise to you," he said, handing the card to William. "Work hard, and we'll help you find a way." William's eyes filled with tears as he held the card like a lifeline. It was a moment Michael knew he would never forget. As the night continued, the mentors shared their own stories of overcoming adversity and pursuing dreams. The students listened intently, their initial nervousness replaced by curiosity and excitement. The cabin buzzed with conversation and occasional bursts of laughter, creating an atmosphere of hope and possibility. At the end of the flight, Michael stood at the front of the cabin to address the group. His voice was warm and powerful, carrying the weight of his sincerity. "I want all of you to remember this night," he said, "not because of the jet or the fancy dinner, but because of what it represents. Each of you has the potential to do incredible things. Your dreams are valid. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And when you face challenges, remember, you are not alone. There are people out there who believe in you and want to see you succeed." He paused, looking around the cabin at the young faces filled with hope and determination. "You are the future, and I can't wait to see all that you will accomplish." As the jet descended back to Chicago, the students gazed out the windows at the city lights, their minds buzzing with new possibilities. When they disembarked, they carried with them not just the memories of an extraordinary night, but also a sense of empowerment that would stay with them for a lifetime. In the weeks that followed, Michael received letters from many of the students, thanking him for the experience and sharing how it had impacted them. William, true to his word, began researching aviation programs and reached out to Wings of Hope for guidance. Michael personally connected him with a mentor, ensuring that his dream of becoming a pilot had a real chance. The success of the dinner inspired Michael to turn it into a regular event, each one aimed at a different group of young dreamers. With every flight, he witnessed the ripple effect of hope and inspiration spreading in ways he had never imagined. For Michael, these dinners were a reminder of why he had started the Wings of Hope initiative in the first place. It wasn't just about fighting inequality. It was about creating opportunities, lifting others up, and showing them that, in reality, the sky is never the limit. As another dinner came to an end and the jet taxied to a stop, Michael Jordan stood at the cabin door, watching the students disembark with wide smiles and animated conversations. Ava joined him, her expression carrying a quiet pride. "You're making a difference, Michael," she said. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the students. "So are they. They just don't know it yet." The chapter closed with Michael looking up at the night sky, a symbol of the limitless potential he hoped to inspire in everyone he encountered. The night sky stretched endlessly above the private runway as Michael watched the last Wings of Hope jet ascend into the heavens. Its powerful engines roared like a declaration, carrying supplies to a hurricane-ravaged region in the Caribbean. The glow of the lights reflected in his eyes, a reminder of how far this journey had come. What had started as a counterstrike against adversity had blossomed into a movement that transcended any expectation, touching lives in ways he never could have imagined. The air was crisp, filled with promise. Ava stood beside him, holding a tablet with updates on the program's latest accomplishments. "This is mission number 54, she said, pride evident in her voice. 54 missions in less than a year, Michael. Do you realize what that means?" Michael didn't respond immediately. Instead, he watched the jet disappear into the night, its lights flickering and fading until they were completely gone. Only then did he turn to Ava. "It means we're just getting started," he said, his voice deep, firm, yet filled with determination. Ava nodded, a smile forming on her lips. "You're right, and you're not the only one who thinks so." She handed him the tablet, where an email was open. It was from a prominent national foundation looking to partner with Wings of Hope, offering funding to expand operations. The proposal included additional aircraft training programs and even a global initiative to bring the program to underserved regions around the world. Michael's eyes scanned the email. His mind raced. The possibilities were staggering, but so were the responsibilities. It was no longer just about planes or flights. It was about creating a lasting legacy, a symbol of hope and change that would endure long after he was gone. "Let's do it," he said, finally handing the tablet back to Ava. "But I want to make sure we stay true to what we started. This isn't about headlines or awards. It's about people." Ava nodded again. "That's why it works. It's always been about people." As the days turned into weeks, the expansion of Wings of Hope began to take shape. New partnerships were forged, bringing in experts from various fields to broaden the project's impact. Pilots volunteered their time, eager to be part of something meaningful. Engineers stepped forward to design more efficient systems for delivering aid. Educators reached out, proposing ways to integrate the program into schools and inspire the next generation of leaders. One of the most ambitious projects was the creation of a training program dedicated to aspiring pilots from underprivileged communities. Michael was deeply moved by his conversation with William during the dinner flight and wanted to ensure that other young people with similar dreams had the resources and support needed to succeed. The program, named Liftoff, was designed to provide scholarships, mentorship, and hands-on experience in the aviation industry. The first group of trainees was made up of a diverse group of young individuals, each with their own story of perseverance and determination. Michael made it a point to meet with them personally, sharing his own journey and encouraging them to embrace their dreams. "You are here because you deserve it," he said during the orientation. "Never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in this place. This is your chance to prove them wrong, but not for them, for you." The trainees responded with enthusiasm, their passion evident in their eagerness to learn. Seeing them take their first steps toward becoming pilots filled Michael with a deep sense of pride and purpose. Moments like those reminded him why he had turned his anger into action. As Wings of Hope grew, its impact became impossible to ignore. The media extensively covered the program, highlighting its success stories and the lives it transformed. One particularly moving segment featured Ava, the young girl from Kansas who was the first beneficiary of the program. Now healthy and thriving, she appeared on camera alongside her mother, expressing gratitude for the second chance that Wings of Hope had given them. It wasn't just an apartment, Ava's mother said through tears. It was hope. It was a reminder that there are people out there who care. The segment went viral, bringing even more attention to the program. Donations surged and volunteers from all walks of life offered their services. Wings of Hope was no longer just a program. It had become a symbol of what could be achieved when compassion and determination came together. Despite the praise and recognition, Michael remained grounded. He knew the work was far from over. There were still countless people in need, barriers to break, and minds to change. But he also knew that Wings of Hope had become something bigger than himself. It was a movement driven by the collective efforts of people who believed in a better world. One night, as Michael Jordan prepared for a lecture, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to that moment. He thought about the security guard on the runway, the officers who doubted him, and the humiliation he had felt. It would have been easy to let the anger consume him, to lash out or retreat into bitterness, but instead he chose to fight, not with his fists, but with action. The lecture was taking place at a university where students from diverse backgrounds had gathered to hear him share his story. As he stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted in applause, their energy filling the room. Michael raised his hands to quiet them, his imposing presence commanding attention. "Thank you," he began, his voice resonating through the auditorium. "But tonight isn't about me. It's about us. It's about what we can achieve when we refuse to let fear or prejudice define us." He spoke about his journey, the moments that tested him, and the choices that shaped him. He shared stories of Wings of Hope, highlighting the lives that had been changed and the dreams that had been ignited. And he challenged the audience to carry that spirit forward, to find their own ways to make a difference. As he concluded his speech, the room exploded into a standing ovation. But for Michael, the real reward came afterward, when students approached him to share their own stories and aspirations. Many spoke about how Wings of Hope had inspired them to believe in their potential, to dream bigger than they ever thought possible. That night, as Michael looked out over the city lights from his hotel room, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Wings of Hope was no longer just an idea or a program. It was a symbol. It represented resilience, compassion, and the power to turn pain into progress. And as long as there were people in need of a helping hand, he knew the work would continue. The story of Michael Jordan and Wings of Hope wasn't just about overcoming prejudice. It was about creating something lasting, something that would inspire and uplift future generations. And as the stars shined above, Michael couldn't help but smile, knowing the journey was far from over. Thank you for following this story. If you made it this far, comment Wings of Hope to affirm Michael Jordan's initiative in this story. Leave a like on this video and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Share this video with your friends and family. Maybe it will inspire others.